They tried to banish my boat, so I blocked off their marina and their future. The same people who find me now had no access to their weekend playground, and they never saw it coming because they forgot I built it. Where are you watching from, by the way? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And hey, if this made you grin already, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what happens next. I moved to Shoreline Pines because I wanted calm. After 20 years in commercial marina development, I'd built enough coastal infrastructure to last 3 lifetimes. Harbors, dry docks, seawalls, you name it. But after selling my final stake in a boatyard franchise chain, I wanted peace. A house by the water, a boat of my own, maybe teach my grandkids to sail one day. Shoreline Pines offered all that. Quiet streets, gated access, a private resident-only marina tucked behind a natural bluff. There was just one small detail no one warned me about. The HOA. At first, it seemed like standard stuff. No political signs, no colored lights, no lawn flamingos. Fine, I dealt with worse. What I hadn't dealt with was a woman like Sandra Finch, president of the HOA and part-time tyrant with a clipboard addiction. Sandra had a rulebook in one hand and a superiority complex in the other. I first met her on a Thursday. I'd just docked my 34-foot fishing boat, the June Rain, after a short morning cruise with my grandson, Ben. I was teaching him how to trim sails and read the wind off the lake. He was 10. First time he'd stopped looking at his iPad in days. We were laughing over a sloppy docking job. He'd tied a fender line around the cleat backwards when I heard a throat clear behind me. Sandra stood there in her signature visor, HOA badge, clipped to her belt like she was deputized by God himself. "Excuse me," she said, tapping her clipboard. "Are you aware that vessels over 28 feet are not permitted in this marina?" I blinked. The June Rain has a 27.5-foot water line. That's what matters. She narrowed her eyes like I'd insulted her personally. It's 34 feet total length. Mr. Callahan, and that exceeds the marina limit as per subsection 8.4c of the HOA covenant. Ben looked confused. "Grandpa, what's she talking about?" "She's talking nonsense," I muttered, then turned to Sandra. "That rule was for before the marina was expanded. I should know. I built half this structure a decade ago when my company was subcontracted by Baystar Development. The HOA inherited it. The restrictions outdated." Sandra's smile was like a paper cut. Thin, sharp, unpleasant. "Well, Mr. Callahan, outdated rules are still rules, and you'll need to remove your vessel within 72 hours or face a daily fine of $500. Ben looked up at me. "Can she do that?" I smiled down at him. "We'll see." That evening, I dug into the HOA charter. I'd been sent a PDF version. At closing, buried in a welcome packet about pool access and dog leash lengths, and there it was. Subsection 8.4c. Maximum vessel length, 28 feet. But just a few pages later, Section 11.3. Infrastructure grandfathering. Any vessel docked or approved prior to 2012 expansion shall not be subject to newly implemented dimensional restrictions. Boom. My dock slip? Built by my crew in 2011. Same space, same specs, same rules. I printed out the page, highlighted it, and emailed Sandra directly. She responded at 3:41 a.m. with a one-sentence reply. "HOA board decisions are final. You are expected to comply. No counterpoint, no acknowledgement." Just that tone, like she was queen of the lake and I was a trespassing fisherman in her kingdom. The next morning, the fine notice was taped to my front door. Bright red, bold print, $500. The day after, another. Then came the violation notice for unsightly nautical equipment, my tackle box, which I'd stored neatly under a dock bench. Then one for excessive water hose length. By Monday, I had $2,000 in violations and a scheduled compliance hearing. I wasn't angry, I was interested, because here's what Sandra didn't know. While most people here moved into Shoreline Pines for the marina, I owned it. Well, not technically, but something close enough to ruin her month. Back in 2011, when Baystar couldn't finance the final Marina extension, my firm fronted the cost in exchange for a long-term maintenance and rights lease. Guess whose name was on that contract? Not the HOA, mine. They didn't own the slips. They didn't own the seawall. They didn't even own the fresh water line used for hull rinses. The only reason they had access was because I let them, and suddenly, I wasn't in the mood to keep letting them. I called my attorney, sent him the documents. He laughed for a full minute. Then he said, "You want to burn it down?" "No," I said. "I want to fence it off." By the time Sandra and her clipboard counsel convened their compliance hearing, I had already started phase 1. They didn't know it, of course. As far as the HOA board was concerned, I was just another stubborn retiree dragging his feet on a boat fine. I showed up to the hearing in a blue golf shirt, coffee in hand, nodding politely like I hadn't spent the past 48 hours drawing up site plans and ordering industrial-grade fencing. Sandra opened the meeting with her signature smugness. "Mr. Callahan," she began, "this is an opportunity for you to explain your non-compliance before the board considers additional enforcement options." I leaned back in my chair. "Sure. Happy to explain." I slid a folder across the table, printouts of the original 2011 Marina expansion contract, my name on the lease, my company's seal, Baystar's signature, the clause they never read. "Infrastructure access and rights shall remain under the maintenance authority of Callahan Coastal until expiration or mutual transfer." Sandra blinked. The others stared. One of them, Len, the only board member who didn't look like he polished his ego every morning, leaned forward to read. "Where did you get this?" Sandra asked. "I wrote it," I said, smiling. She scoffed. "This contract is over a decade old, and it's still active. The renewal clause was automatic. You've all been enjoying unrestricted access to my marina because I didn't charge anyone for it." That shut her up for about 6 seconds. "Even if that's true," she said, recovering, "this doesn't override community rules. You're still in violation." "No," I said calmly. "You're in violation. You've been enforcing rules on property you don't control, issuing fines against boats tied to docks you don't own. That's not authority. That's trespassing." Gasps around the room. Len looked like he'd seen a ghost. Sandra stood. "We'll have our lawyer review this." "You do that," I replied, already halfway to the door. "But just so you know, starting tomorrow, I'm exercising my right to secure the property." The next morning, the fencing crew arrived at 7:03 a.m., chain link. Steel-reinforced posts, double-padlocked gates, 2 full rolls of private access. Only signs. It took 8 hours to seal the perimeter of the entire marina, every dock, every slip, every seawall ladder. The entrance gate was rigged with a key code lock, cameras mounted above. I even placed a small kiosk with a digital reader, and sign-in screen that read, "Marina access temporarily revoked, under private control questions. Contact Callahan Coastal Infrastructure, LLC." I didn't need to watch their reactions. I heard them. By sunset, my phone had 12 missed calls from board members. One voicemail from Sandra that simply said, "This is outrageous." Another, from a man I didn't recognize who growled, "You've made an enemy." That one made me smile. By Friday, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. You don't block off a marina and expect silence. Especially when half the homeowners spent their weekends polishing jet skis and sailing to the same 2 overpriced lakeside restaurants. And yet, here we were. 50 boats, 0 access. People walked the fence line like prisoners at Alcatraz. One guy even tried scaling it. Got stuck halfway up and had to be helped down by 2 teenagers with iPhones and no sympathy. Meanwhile, I sat on my porch, sipping coffee and polishing the June rain. Still docked. Still oversized. Still mine. Saturday's emergency HOA meeting was pure theater. Sandra stood at the podium, voice high-pitched and cracking with desperation. "This is a community emergency," she shrieked. "One resident has taken it upon himself to disrupt the function of our marina and destabilize the neighborhood." I watched from the back, arms crossed. She didn't acknowledge me, but she didn't have to. Every sentence was aimed like a dart in my direction. She accused me of creating an unlawful blockade, claimed I was violating shared usage expectations, even tried to say I was threatening property values. That's when Len finally spoke up. "Actually," he said, holding up my contract, "this document says the HOA never purchased the marina property, and the bylaws don't apply to land we don't own." Dead silence. Someone in the front row mumbled, "Wait, is that true?" Len looked straight at Sandra. "You've been fining people for years on docks you don't legally control." The room turned, slowly, like a wave of suspicion shifting its target. Sandra looked rattled. "Regardless," she snapped, "this situation is unsustainable. I am demanding Mr. Callahan remove the fencing immediately or face legal action." That's when I stepped forward. "Try it," I said simply. "And while you're at it, explain to the court why you've been issuing monetary penalties and controlling access to private infrastructure. That'll go over well." Sandra opened her mouth, then closed it. And for the first time in 3 months, she didn't have anything to say. That night, I sent a letter to every homeowner in the community, not from me, from Callahan Coastal Infrastructure. It read, "Due to unauthorized policy enforcement by the Shoreline Pines HOA and legal mismanagement of property access, all marina privileges have been suspended pending individual review. Residents may request access on a per-slip basis by submitting a signed waiver and annual maintenance contribution of $1,200. Cue panic." The HOA hotline was flooded. Their inbox overflowed. Sandra's name was dragged across every group chat. "And Boater Forum within 20 miles, and on Monday I got a call from Lynn. You win," he said. "She's stepping down." By Monday evening, Sandra Finch was nowhere to be found. Her usual HOA status updates, usually posted promptly by 6 p.m., were missing. The official HOA website's announcement board had gone blank. The group chat she used to moderate with, an iron fist turned into a digital riot. Homeowners wanted answers. Why was the marina fenced off? Why were they being told to pay another $1,200 just to access the water they'd always assumed they owned? Why hadn't the HOA disclosed any of this at the last annual meeting? The short answer? Because Sandra had no idea who she was dealing with, and the long answer was playing out in real time, one resident rebellion at a time. It started with the West Dock Owners Circle, about 15 of them, most of them retired or semi-retired, boaters, decided to hold their own informal meeting on Tuesday morning. They invited me, but I didn't attend. I didn't have to. They were already angry. I wanted them furious, so I did something better. I gave them information. 1 hour before their gathering, I emailed every resident a PDF packet titled, "What Your HOA Never Told You About the Marina." Inside were the original lease agreements, the access rights, the 2011 infrastructure map stamped and signed, screenshots of HOA fines issued without jurisdiction, even a breakdown of how much of their dues had gone toward dock maintenance over the past 5 years, despite the fact that the HOA didn't maintain the docks. The reaction? Explosive. One man, Greg Tomlinson, sent a reply all to the entire community. "If Sandra's been billing us for access to a dock she never owned, that's fraud. Someone call a lawyer." By that afternoon, a volunteer group of residents had started collecting signatures for a vote of no confidence. Sandra tried to push back. She sent a community-wide message from her personal email, full of bold fonts and panicked language. "We must maintain unity during this time of confusion. Mr. Callahan is exploiting a legal technicality to create division. The HOA has always acted in good faith." It backfired. Residents didn't want unity. They wanted answers. And no one wanted to hear about good faith from a woman who'd fined their kids for skateboarding near the clubhouse. Wednesday brought the first legal letter from a resident. A retired defense attorney named Myra Jennings sent Sandra a cease and desist notice demanding she immediately stop issuing any communication about the marina, claiming it as HOA property or making threats of enforcement. Then she sent me a copy with a handwritten note. "Don't stop. You've got the whole neighborhood behind you now." By Thursday, the vote to remove Sandra as HOA president was official. Percent of the community signed off. Len, the only board member with a conscience, resigned too, but not before doing something unexpected. He called me and asked if we could meet. Agreed. We sat on a bench by the community pond, away from the docks, away from the noise. Len looked tired. "I knew she was strict," he said, "but I never imagined it was this deep. She bullied people into silence, threatened legal action every time someone asked a question, and none of us knew the HOA didn't actually own the marina." "You're not the only one," I said, "but now you do." He nodded. "So, what happens now?" I smiled. "That depends. You want to help fix this?" Friday morning, we held a town hall, not an HOA meeting, a real meeting. No raised podiums, no laminated rules, just folding chairs in the community center and residents, who were ready for change. I stood in front, Len beside me, holding the packet I'd emailed earlier. "Let's get a few things straight," I began. "I didn't fence off the marina because I hate this community. I fenced it off because I love it, and I'm tired of watching people like Sandra weaponize authority they don't have." A few heads nodded. "I spent years building marinas like this across the coast. You know what I learned? They thrive when they're shared, when people feel like they belong, not when they're told they're lucky to be allowed near the water." A woman raised her hand. "Is it true? We never owned the marina?" Len answered. "It's true. The HOA never purchased it. The board never disclosed that." Another man chimed in. "So we've been paying fees for nothing?" I answered. "For access I gave you, for free, until they turned it into a weapon." Silence. Then, slowly, a wave of quiet clapping. Then louder, then standing. The following Monday, the interim board passed 3 motions. Sandra Finch was permanently barred from holding any HOA leadership position. All fines issued related to marina use in the past 5 years would be refunded or nullified. The board would enter negotiations with Callahan Coastal to establish a new access lease. Transparent, fairly priced, and resident reviewed. I agreed. On one condition: no board member could control marina rules again. Ever. The marina would be overseen by a community-elected dock council, separate from the HOA, made up of boat owners, engineers, residents with no agenda. Everyone agreed. Unanimously. Meanwhile, Sandra wasn't finished, not by a long shot. She lawyered up and filed a complaint claiming I had seized community assets illegally and disrupted shared infrastructure. It went nowhere. Her attorney dropped the case after seeing the lease documents. A few weeks later, she listed her house, below market value. No offers came in. Not after her name showed up in 3 local news stories about HOA corruption. Karma. Didn't even knock on her door. It barged in and removed her dock access. By the end of the month, fences came down, but not entirely. We replaced the metal links with gated arches, beautiful wood beams with small bronze plaques that read, "Welcome to Callahan Marina, shared by the people who care for it." Every resident now had a key card. Access was monitored, maintained, and respected. No more fines, no more threats. Just sunlight, sails, and water. For the first time in years, Shoreline Pines felt like a community again. There's a kind of silence that only happens after a storm, the kind where the air feels clearer, the sky bluer, and the place you live feels just a little bit more like home. That's how Shoreline Pines felt 3 weeks after the fences came. Down, gone were the red violation slips on windshields. Gone were the whispered threats at HOA meetings. And gone, mercifully, finally, was Sandra Finch. Her house stood empty at the edge of the cul-de-sac. A real estate agent tried to drum up interest with buzzwords like exclusive waterfront potential and marina proximity. But buyers had read the articles. They'd seen the news stories. One headline read, HOA tyrant ousted after, finding the man who built the marina. Sandra's legacy was baked into the walls of that house. No one wanted it. Meanwhile, something far more powerful was building just across the street: community. It started small. Just a few neighbors gathered at the docks for a shared lunch. Someone brought sandwiches. Someone else brought a Bluetooth speaker. Kids played tag along the seawall like it had always been their playground. For the first time since I moved in, people smiled when they walked past each other. They waved, talked, laughed without looking over their shoulder for clipboard patrol. At one of those dock lunches, Len pulled up a chair beside me. "We're thinking of making this a monthly thing," he said, glancing at the growing crowd. "Maybe call it Marina Mingle." I grinned. "Rolls off the tongue." Len leaned forward. "You know, you did more than kick her out. You changed the way we see this place." I looked out over the water. Sometimes people just need permission to reclaim something that always belonged to them. He nodded. "We were asleep. You woke us up." Of course, not everyone changed overnight. There were still a few grumbles about the new dock council. A few residents who whispered that the HOA had been trying to keep things in order. But those voices were quieter now. They didn't carry the same weight, because for every complaint, there were 10 stories of residents finally feeling seen, like Maria, the widow who had stopped gardening after Sandra fined her for non-regulation flower species. She'd started again, this time planting bright, untamed sunflowers in a wooden bed right by her front walk. Or the Rivera kids, whose kayak had been confiscated by the HOA for unauthorized vessel storage. They were back on the water now, paddling circles around older boaters who cheered them on, or Myra Jennings, the retired lawyer who'd sent Sandra that cease and desist. She'd volunteered to lead monthly legal workshops to help other neighborhoods audit their HOAs. Turns out, what we'd gone through wasn't rare. It was just rarely fought back against. The story didn't stop at Shoreline Pines. A local podcast picked it up, then a regional real estate blog. Then it exploded when a YouTube creator who covered housing rights made a video titled, "Man Gets Fined for Boat, Shuts Down Entire HOA Marina with Legal Boss Move." Over 1.2 million views. That's when the emails started pouring in. People from Florida, California, Texas, North Carolina, all saying the same thing. We thought we were alone. We didn't know we could fight back. Thank you. I responded to everyone I could, and then I got an idea. With help from Myra, Len, and a few tech-savvy neighbors, we launched a website, dockrights.org, a simple name. A big mission. We published downloadable templates for lease reviews, violation response letters, and guides for identifying fake HOA power claims. We created a map where users could tag their own communities and leave anonymous stories about their experiences. In 3 months, we had over 50,000 visitors. By 6 months, we were being cited in local news coverage in 5 different states. Back in Shoreline Pines, change became the new normal. The newly elected dock council ran monthly reports, publicly posted. Every access decision was made via resident vote. The council even included 2 teenagers, voted in after residents said, "The kids use the marina more than half of us." Len became the unofficial community historian, compiling stories and timelines into a printed community yearbook. He titled it, "The Summer the Water Fought Back." My name was in there, but so were the names of every neighbor who spoke up, who signed a petition, who showed up to a meeting when it would have been easier to stay home. The story was no longer about me. It was about us. One afternoon, I was out on the June rain, tying off a few new lines when Ben, my grandson, walked up with a question. "Grandpa," he said, Why didn't you just sell the house and leave when they started all that? It was a fair question. I paused, then nodded for him to sit beside me. I've built harbors in places with worse storms than Sandra Finch, I said. But you don't run every time the wind shifts. You build stronger moorings. He tilted his head. What's a mooring? I smiled. It's what holds the boat in place, even in bad weather. He thought about that for a second, then looked at the houses lining the marina. We're the moorings now, huh? That kid gets it. Didn't set out to become a symbol. I didn't want to lead a movement. I just wanted to teach my grandson how to fish and maybe watch the sun rise a few more times without bureaucratic nonsense ruining the view. But sometimes, justice starts with a fine. Sometimes with a fence. Sometimes with a boat that's 6 feet, too long for someone else's comfort. And sometimes, it starts when one person says, "Not today." 1 year later, I stood at the edge of the dock as a plaque was unveiled. It read, "In honor of the residents who reclaimed their community, for those who know that access isn't a privilege, it's a right." And below that, in smaller letters, dedicated to Frank Callahan, who taught us how to hold the line. I didn't say much at the ceremony, didn't need to. The docks said everything. Kids raced each other in paddle boats. Seniors sipped iced tea on folding chairs. Someone played acoustic guitar under the new pergola, and nobody asked for permission. Because sometimes, the strongest statement you can make isn't in court. It's in standing still, when someone tries to push you out of something you helped build. And if you're watching this from your own neighborhood, dealing with your own HOA nonsense, remember this: a clipboard doesn't make someone right. A rule book doesn't make someone in charge. And a fine is just paper until you fight back with purpose and maybe a fence.